Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this evening. We're pleased to welcome you to the first event celebrating the 20th anniversary of the ICJ Major, the BA program in International Criminal Justice at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Tonight's theme is exploring careers in the private sector with your John Jay degree. And so we will be having a conversation with ICJ alumni from both the BA and the MA programs. We will be having another one of these events looking at careers in the nonprofit sector on November 19th. So stay tuned for that. But tonight we're lucky to have 6 panelists, and I'd like to welcome you to this session. Also to give a shout out to my sister, Gohar Petrosian, who directs the MA program in International Criminal Justice. And have you meet the moderator of tonight's event, which is Palumi Rajibalaji, a student currently in the new ICJ BA MA program. And so she will take over. At this point, we will have a round of questions for the panelists that Palumi will be asking, and I will be monitoring the chat for questions that occur to you in the audience that we can pose once we finish the initial discussion. So please feel free to use the chat bar to make comments or pose questions. I'll be monitoring that. So Palumi, go ahead and take it away.
Welcome everyone. My name is Palumi. I am currently a student in the ICJ BA MA program. I'm also currently the president of the ICJ Club, and welcome once again. To start this off, we're gonna start by introducing the panelists, and I'm gonna ask them to answer 2 questions also. If you weren't for John Jay, and they fill in the blank. And the second question is just a general overview of the current role at the place of work. From my screen here, Elmer seems like the first person to go. So yeah, over to you, Elmer.
Hey guys, my name is Elmer. I graduated John Jay in 2018, 2 years ago. Time is going by way too fast. The first question is, if it weren't for John Jay, I wouldn't have met the amazing mentors, professor that I can now call friend, especially to Henry Pontel. I don't know who has taken class with him, but he calls me on a monthly basis, making sure that I'm doing good and what I'm up to. I visit him in California. He comes to New York and back and forth. We made a good friendship, which I value. And for the second question, what do you do in your current work, in your current role? I work for Aon Cyber Solutions. I work in the intelligence division. I'm currently a due diligence analyst. What we do is mostly, I do research and I investigate people. Technically, whenever there is a deal like a merger and acquisition, whenever there's a pre-employment check, I conduct them. I do a background check on people. I make sure that the companies that they're working with are not in litigation problems. They don't have negative press. And that's also known as KYC, which is Know Your Customer. Pass it back to you, Palumi.
Thank you so much, Elmer. Next person on my screen is David. So over to you, David.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to share sort of a little bit about myself as well as my experience. So I graduated in '07, where I guess to address the first question, where would I be? You know, I had aspirations of becoming an FBI agent, also getting into law enforcement. And so if it weren't for John Jay, I'd probably be serving our nation that way in one of those capacities. I did go through several exams for the NYPD, State Trooper, as well as the FBI. But one thing led to another, and I ended up where I am today. And today, I hopefully I get to share a little bit more in greater detail about how I got here. But I'm at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and I structure equity over-the-counter derivatives for our family offices and our ultra-high net worth clients. And so much of what I do is interacting with clients, helping them with their portfolios as well as their investment needs. But before I got there, just a real in a nutshell, I started off with anti-money laundering compliance. That's how I got my foot in the door. Well, first as a teller, and then handling AML compliance, and then moved on to several different roles, which ultimately led to this particular role now. So I'd love to share more with you later, but don't want to suck up the air here.
Thank you so much, David. Pleasure having you here. Next person on the screen is Maria. So over to you, Maria.
Good evening. My name is Maria. I graduated with MA in 2015 from the ICJ program. I'm very glad to be joining you this evening. So the first question, if it weren't for John Jay, I think my career would have probably looked completely different. And I hypothesize that it probably wouldn't be as rewarding. I think when I was choosing a major and choosing a school, even going back to my bachelor's, criminal justice was like the only major that I wanted to pursue, and there wasn't really a question. I think I only applied to like 2 colleges, and I'm very glad I got in. I think it was, I kind of had a vision for myself, maybe kind of similar to David. I wanted to join law enforcement and be a special agent, and I sort of like John Jay really helped me introduce me to that world, and I think I have the rewarding career that I have in part of my pursuit in this kind of education. And what I currently do in my current role, I'm currently an investigator at Facebook. I can't provide a lot of details about my role, but in kind of the grand scheme of things, I conduct research into activity that involves abuse on the platform, and I help attribute it to the actors who may be behind it. So nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Nice knowing that little bit about you. Next on the screen is Katie.
Thanks. So interestingly enough, Maria and I were part of the same graduate class. So that's really, it's always nice to see people in the same class who really benefited from John Jay. I did my graduate work at John Jay when I was sitting and thinking what was next. I had already begun, and I was at the University of California when Henry Pontel was there, and had begun work on Russian organized crime, some cyber in nature, but not as advanced as it is now, and knew that I wanted to match wits, so to speak, with some of these complex organizations that we have, not necessarily domestic. I started looking at the programs that were offered, and there were only 3 in the nation at the time that were international in nature. So I applied to all 3, got rejected for my safety, which was an humbling experience, but fortunately got into my first choice, which was John Jay, and had really been interested in New York, wanted to go to New York. So this was my ticket to New York, which was really exciting. Met a lot of incredible people. One of the people in my graduate class is the person who recruited me to my current position at a correspondent bank. But I've also held roles. I held a top secret security clearance for the federal government. I've worked in both the private and the public sector. So I worked at an intelligence firm, intellectual property law firm, worked on an organized crime textbook while I was at John Jay with a mentor. I worked on a sociology textbook, editing for diversity and inclusion as part of my academic career. And now I'm able to pursue pro bono projects. So right now I'm a pro bono, registered pro bono private investigator for the missing. So I also held private sector investigative positions. I now work in financial crime and compliance, like I mentioned, at the bank. So dealing with anti-money laundering sanctions, counter-terrorist financing, these sorts of things. I've worked on human trafficking cases. The bank has 3 lines of defense, and essentially I sit in the second line. It's a little bit complicated, not necessarily an intro, but it allows me to do that analytical and logical nature of work that I described. I also enjoy working in the private sector because it allows me the flexibility to pursue things that are I held deeply important, for example, education. So that flexibility is really important. And I also just wanted to mention that Standard Chartered has partnered with John Jay to develop a mentorship program, which is due, I believe, August 23rd in the financial crime space, which is on John Jay's website right now. So I can drop the job code in. That's a year-long mentorship in the financial crime space that for juniors and sophomores that you can certainly consider. And that comes as part of having me being able to have that relationship both in the private and the education sector.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you for also dropping that information. Students in the meeting, definitely check that out. I also applied, by the way. Next person on the screen is Rolitza.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to share my experience. So I graduated from John Jay in 2008 with the BA program, and immediately after that I moved back to Bulgaria. As similar to David, I also wanted to be like in law enforcement. I worked for a couple of years in Bulgarian law enforcement. I was in the International Cooperation Department of the Ministry of Interior, which is like the head of the Bulgarian law enforcement arm. And then at some point I decided that I really wanted to build some more skills, maybe like hedge my options if I want to go into the private sector or more like go into financial crimes investigations. So maybe for the first questions, if it weren't for John Jay, I don't think I would have pursued that career path. And then eventually I saw that it's not the path for me. So after I applied for an MBA program in the US, left my job and came to do my MBA. Initial idea was to do it in to do some sort of an MBA with CPA concentration, do a certified fraud examiner kind of certification, and just like go into financial crimes, either back in Bulgaria into the another law enforcement agency or maybe into the private sector. I kind of got an internship in between of the 2 years of the MBA in Huntington National Bank. I was in the FP&A department. I didn't have much experience with finance at that point, but like kind of it was pretty interesting building these skills. So I decided to major in finance the second year. So after I graduated, they gave me like a full-time offer with the bank. And for the first 3 years, I did some more like stress testing. That's kind of what the regulators have been doing, making banks do after the financial crisis in 2008 and 9. And after that, I moved to my current role. What I'm doing now is interest rate risk management. So just like in very broad terms, we just measure and analyze our potential losses that will stem from interest rate movements. And it's been really interesting in the last couple of months since the pandemic started, because I mean, I think my workload has increased at least double in the last couple of months. So it's kind of a very rewarding field to be right now. just because things are not going as smoothly as they were going a couple of years ago. So it's just like interesting to learn. And I think that's it on my side. Back to you, Palumi.
Thank you so much, Rolita. And last but not the least on the panel today is John.
Hi, hello everybody. Good evening. Thank you for joining. Thank you very much, Palumi, and thank you, Dr. Barberet, for having me on here. And great stories to hear from the other panelists. And much like the other panelists, if it wasn't for John Jay, I don't think I would be in the career I am in now. I have a military background, and I am a veteran of 2 deployments in the United States Army. But without that John Jay background to give me the additional educational experience in transnational crime, international crime, human rights, and things like that, I don't think I would have landed the position my first position at JP Morgan Chase. I've been at JP Morgan Chase for over 7 years now, and in my current role, I'm a sanctions investigator. So yeah, basically like what David said and some of the other panelists, is financial crimes compliance. It's white collar crime. We do it sort of related to that is fraud investigations, anti-money laundering investigations. But as I said, currently in my role, we investigate sanctions concern for the firm, and that's it's a small team. It's not a huge team, and we investigate cases that have a sanctions touch point across all the lines of businesses in the firm, and corporate, employee, and global. It's not just North America, but all of APAC, Europe, and Latin America. So again, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm looking forward to spending the night here with everybody here to share stories. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I'm sure, just like every other person on this mission today, one similarity amongst everybody that introduced themselves today, we keep on hearing investigations, we keep on hearing compliance, we keep on hearing AML, that's anti-money laundering. And like John also mentioned, he mentioned white colored crimes. And we also, I think research was also one that was quite repetitive. So how would you say you were able to efficiently use your ICJ degree to land your job, like your current role where you are right now, in regards to all the words I mentioned and all the things you're currently doing? John should take that first, and yeah.
So I think thank you for that. Basically, when I first interviewed, I think that they looked at that right away, right off the bat. John Jay College, one of the managers that the hiring managers that interviewed me had mentioned how they had other folks with a law enforcement background that did have an ICJ, John Jay College background, was very helpful for them. Because essentially what we were doing is we were standing up an anti-money laundering operations team at John Jay, at JP Morgan Chase. And at the time, and this is public record, JP Morgan Chase had just received, a few years before, it had received a consent order. So the consent order came from like DOJ, FinCEN, the OCC, basically a myriad of government agencies. We weren't the only bank. There was other banks that received consent orders too for basically lack of AML controls, sanctions controls, and things of that sort. So I think just having that name on your resume really stands out, especially in roles like this in financial crimes compliance.
There's a question for you, John, in the chat, which is, how did you get your job? Was it did you apply, or was it through a contact?
So I do want to mention, and this is part of, I think one of the questions that may be discussed later on, is the networking, how important that is. And actually, it was a friend of mine who was also a John Jay college graduate. He wasn't in the ICJ program, but he was in the criminal justice program. And essentially, this is kind of a long story, but he asked me to go to a law enforcement seminar at Rutgers Law School. And so I went, and out of all the agencies, law enforcement agencies were the most companies there, the most agencies, but JP Morgan Chase had their own setup. And I just went there and I was asking what was this about. And they said, yeah, apply. We're standing up like an anti-money laundering organization. And based on your resume, this is something that could be of value. So they told me to look out for an interview or a phone call in 2 weeks. And from that point on, I got the phone call 2 weeks later. And I think I interviewed 2 weeks after that. And I got the job. And again, I just want to stress that I think not only that we were standing up a new AML or operations team, but the fact that I had that John Jay degree, I think that really stands out. I think that was something that really captured their attention.
Thank you so much, John. I was actually going to bring up the issue of networking later, but before I do dive into that question, I would also like Elmer to also kind of go into how the ICJ degree necessarily plays a role in what it does currently as well.
Thank you. I think something that most of our jobs have in common is research. We're constantly doing research and reading. And one thing that I gained from John Jay was being able to do a lot of research. In my essay and the capstone thesis, I already knew in the field that I wanted to go into. So I did my thesis in financial crimes and how cryptocurrency is being used to launder money. That really caught the attention of a lot of interviewees, and I was able to speak about it in my interviews. I was able to relate how something that is coming up right now in our century to relate it to the financial crimes and the things that are going on in the world. And I think most of my knowledge that I gained was through actual research and reading and all of the subjects where we have to learn about different problems in a global perspective. And that also helped me to be able to talk about what's going on in Europe, what's going on in Latin America. And right now we're at a point where you have to have knowledge, a little bit of knowledge of everything that is going on. You cannot just focus in the US. You have to focus in what's going on in Asia, because you never know what type of question is gonna come up in an interview, and you don't know in what team you're gonna be once you get a job. Personally, my job is very focused in Latin America. So being able to speak about transnational crime, international crime in Latin America was very helpful.
Thank you so much, Elmer. Thank you for dropping that tip. Guys, you should definitely write a thesis that would put you on the map so you can talk about it. Next question is about networking, and I would like to start with David. I know about 4 panelists are in the financial institution companies. So I would like to start with David, and then we could also touch on other panelists as well.
Yeah.
How did networking help you land your job, and how much do you think networking is important to students, especially undergrads?
Yeah, I think it's, thanks for the question. I mean, it's obvious that networking is so critical to landing a job, to really apply yourself or have the opportunity to apply yourself, and everything that you've learned at John Jay and continue to learn at John Jay. I guess just a little bit about myself in terms of how every networking opportunity got me to where I ultimately got to here. So it may be a little lengthy, so Pulumi, feel free to cut me off. Just working at getting my foot in the door at the bank, that was a big deal. That all happened because I was working as a bartender and I was serving drinks, and apparently you can serve drinks, before the age of 21, but you can't consume it. In any case, met a customer of ours, and she had been working at HSBC. Long story short, we struck up a conversation. She was like, yeah, I work at the bank and they're hiring. If you're interested, if you don't want to work nights, you can give this a shot. And so that's how I took up the job, right? So there goes one networking opportunity, and it happens everywhere and anywhere, right? So always keep your eye out for that. And then once there, I still was attending John Jay, and obviously with everything that we're learning, everyone mentioned the transnational crime, international crime. AML was a big deal because that was after the events of 9/11. And so all the banks were really ramping up their operations, like John said. And in HSBC, they were also ramping it up as well, right? And so I too am in the military. Well, actually was in the military. So I joined the Marine Corps, also served 2 tours. So I have that experience and that connection as well, right? So there goes another network that I was able to tap into. And I connected with a former airman at the bank. I forget how I did it, but nevertheless, he was working at, he was actually building it up, the AML team. Really smart guy. And mind you, I was still a student, okay? I did not graduate yet. And he offered me a job. And I was able to sort of speak knowledgeably about just white-collar crime in general, because that's what we were studying. And it was very easy for me to speak to it. And, quite honestly, there aren't too many people, well, at least at the time, too many people who had that bit of knowledge, or actually that very focused knowledge, I should say. And so I think that impressed him. Also, the network helped as well. And, I landed a job. I don't think I did too well in the interview, but nevertheless, he gave me an opportunity. And I think that's how a lot of things start too. But then, I worked really hard. I applied everything that I've learned at John Jay. And from there, I moved around to different places, again, networking to different firms. From HSBC, moved to American Express, Safra National Bank, moved into different roles. Doing that, I met another gentleman at Safra who was sitting on the trading desk. That's where I ultimately ended up. I went from AML compliance to general compliance. Then I moved into a role within risk management, sat on the trading desk and said, wow, these guys are doing something pretty cool. And they were making a lot of money. That was also another draw, right? And to be completely honest. And so I said, well, what I'm doing here is I'm solving a lot of people's problems. These guys are creating all the problems. And so what's the dynamic there? So I want to understand what they're doing. And perhaps there's something that I can apply based on what I've learned, especially given that, I do come from a background of defense, right? There's a defense aspect from the military perspective, defense aspect from AML, defense aspect from compliance, right? And so trying to apply all those things while these guys are creating all the problems, I thought there was an opportunity there as well. And so that spurred me to get my MBA at NYU. The reason why I joined NYU was because the gentleman that I had met at the firm, he was also a graduate of NYU. So there was another network, if you will, that inspired me to go that route. And that ultimately led to a career change of sorts. Really a career change in general, not of sorts. And then, obviously from there, moved on to a small hedge fund, which went under eventually. But then after it had gone under, I met another gentleman through my church network. And he gave me the idea of, hey, there are several roles out, within Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and you should take a look at that. And so I did, using my John Jay degree as well as my MBA degree combined, I think, that impressed certain people, and I was able to land a job working within equities, albeit very different, but nevertheless, I think the analytical skills that I've acquired over the years, directly as a result from doing the work at John Jay was really beneficial to where I was able to sort of how I was able to navigate and ultimately end up where I am today. So
Thank you so much, David. I think as undergraduate students, and I hope I'm not just speaking for myself, I hope I'm speaking for everybody, we often tend to undermine the power of people around us. And most times, the only thing stopping us is ourselves. So your story was a really great example of how we shouldn't undermine the power of the people around us, because you never really know who can put you towards that, like, I guess, your ultimate career in life. Thank you so much again. Ralita, I would also pitch this question to you also about networking, especially because you were an international student, I believe. How would you say you were able to basically, I know you said you came back here and you did the MBA, and then you ended up landing the job at the bank. So how did networking happen to help you in any sort of way? And also the fact that you went back home and also served the country, how did the networking back there also help you land the job?
Right, thank you for that question. So I don't have as many networking examples as David had, but I would definitely say, okay, starting from when I went back into Bulgaria, I initially applied for a job in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it was more something like more like an internship. But through that internship, I think I met some people from the department in the Ministry of Interior, for which I eventually got a job at. And again, the networking was more, they kind of knew me or knew people who knew me. So it was easier for them when asking for recommendations, or when they called my boss and asked, well, she's applying for this position, what could you tell us about her? So he gave me a good recommendation. So that was one example. The real power of networking, when I noticed it, is when I moved back to the US to pursue my MBA. And that's one of the main things that they drill in your mind in the MBA program, that you have to network. Like, that's kind of one of your most important things that you need to do during an MBA program, just like network and try to get a job after graduation. And they were having a lot of kind of in-person events, and I generally prefer to network in person. A lot of times people are encouraged to just like kind of cold message people on LinkedIn. I never did that, and I don't know, it's tough for me to do, but like in-person networking, I think really helps just to know people. And like an advice I can give, I'm generally more introverted. It's difficult for me to just walk out to someone and be like, hey, I'm Raleigh, I'm like interested in this and this. So I usually always had friends who are very extroverted at those events, who would like just like go to people, start chatting them up, and then I kind of hang back with them. And then I'll start talking as well, because for me it was just difficult to do that initial, like to just start. Where networking really helped me is getting my current job. So once I got my foot into the bank with my internship, so the person who hired me is kind of is our current treasurer in the bank. But he hired me for the internship. Then the next year, when I was like emailing them asking if they could possibly give me, if I can use them as recommendations for job search, or if they have something lined up or like something like position for that they're hiring. So they called me up with like, I think, yeah, with my position that I initially started full-time in the bank. And my interview was pretty, I would say, easy, just because they kind of already knew about me. So it was more like general chit chat, was not like super detailed, asking you difficult questions. So once I get this job, there was a team that I really was very interested in joining, which is my current team. It's kind of in balance sheet management. It falls within treasury. Where I started was corporate finance. So I kind of get to know a lot of the people. I introduce myself. I kind of let them know that I'm interested in positions on their team, if they know about any openings. I start getting invited to their happy hour, so I kind of had like kind of an insight when they would have a position open. I got some good pointers how to do what to talk on the interview, etc. So like once the position opened, I feel that the interview was more like formality, if you want to call it, because they already knew me. They worked with me. We were on some committees together, so they heard me presenting or preparing materials, or so I think that was kind of helpful, just like networking with these people. If you're interested in like a position, just like go talk to people on those teams and they might help you get in.
Thank you so much, Alisa. So you see, she mentioned that she's introverted, and I know some of us, maybe I'm partially introverted, and definitely drawing energy from our like totally extroverted friends. That's not wrong, because like you said, that definitely puts you like on the step to so many great things, and also the insider networking as well. Not being scared to ask questions, not being scared to ask for information. I think all of this are all important at the end of the day in the concept of networking. Now I'm gonna go to Maria. You currently work at Facebook as an investigator, and as we all know, Facebook is a tech company, social media platform. I want to believe that majority of students don't necessarily, majority of the panelists mentioned today, when they were at John Jay, the dream was, yeah, I want to be a FBI agent, a special agent. David and John, they did the tour like in the military before they made that shift. You also had that dream to be an FBI agent. So how would you say you were able to, I guess, make that shift, or like also realize you were able to apply what you learned from John Jay, the ICJ degree especially, to the tech sector?
Thank you. It's a really excellent question. So at first, I mean, thinking back to when I was studying, I didn't have a vision, or like I couldn't imagine that I could apply what I've learned in a company like Facebook or the companies that I worked at previously. I had, like, let's just say, an ambition to be able to apply it in the public sector, working at city. So actually, I started out my career working for the city of New York, and I held several roles within investigative space in different city agencies. And I was on that path to continue, potentially going from city to government. 5 years ago, I chose to relocate to California. And that was a complete changer, because I had established a lot of connections in New York, especially in the government space. And in the years that I did work in New York City, I had, similarly to previous notes, I had connections that helped me get roles and move from one city agency to another because they knew me. And transitioning to a new state where I didn't know anybody, nor did I know anybody in the government space, it was a little scary, but this is when I kind of was opened up to potentially exploring other spaces. So when I was searching for roles and I was looking for things that have something related to fraud or investigations, something that kept coming up was risk. And risk is such a general term. You can apply it to anything. And I went for a few interviews at companies that were in tech. My first company was, it's called Gustio. Gustio is a payroll company. Now, who would have thought payroll company is somebody who has a background in criminal justice? I mean, considering it probably does, but in the sense that you can apply the things that we've learned when it comes to the criminal justice system and the sociology and all of this kind of background. But it turns out it was extremely useful, especially when it came to the interview and being able to use it in like the day-to-day as far as the thought process. So my first role in tech space revolved around about looking for new applicants that would try to join to use the product when they were using stolen identities, when they're using stolen bank accounts in order to try to manipulate where the funds will end up going and try to steal the money where a company would end up losing. It was a very new space, but it was very applicable. It's very much in the white collar space. And I think this is where I was first introduced to the need to expand on the technical skills, because having the knowledge and getting in through the door, it was relatively kind of, it was doable. I can't say that it was easy. I think it took me some time, but using like the knowledge that I built up when I started working in tech and getting some SQL skills and learning a little bit of coding really helped progress me and allow me to be able to move around now within the tech space, within this now payments and risk industry. And this is how I was able to get to my next role at this company called Bill.com, which was also a payments company. But in that first introduction, that first intro role, transitioning from like city work to tech work, I think that was like a learning, like very, very, very quick learning and total mind shift. Like I had a mind shift 180. Considering transition of a state and then considering the transition of the type of work you're in, it's a very different environment. It's very, I can't say one is better than the other, but it's definitely something that you might have to adapt to, especially if you get used to sort of having a particular routine, because there's a lot of unpredictability. Like there's things are very rapidly changing. The products in tech are evolving very quickly. So you have to constantly keep on top of like what is next and what are the fraudsters going to do next, and how are you going to work on building the tools to capture the next type of attempt. And so that like transition is really, really quick. And then coming to where I am now, I think everything in combination that I've done working for the city and what I learned over the 4 years when working in California helped me land my current role, where I had a combination background, where now I have some technical skills, I have the mindset and sort of the background to be able to pursue these kind of type of investigations. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Maria. I love the details about everything. So I think from every panelist, we're learning like different kinds of lessons. From Maria, we learned that never be too scared to relocate. You never know. You never know what opportunities you might find. Now I have a question to pitch towards Casey as well. A lot of the things we're talking about here also relates to, I guess, getting new skills or even certifications after getting that degree, and then being able to thrive in whatever role you find yourself. So, and Casey also mentioned she's balancing her career in the bank and also with a passion in education. So how would you, recommend getting the skills and also certification to, I guess, be able to set yourself different apart from others, maybe in an interview and also in the career in general? Katie, over to you.
Yeah, so one thing when I interview people, I'm looking for passion And I don't find that's something you can fake. The passionate employees have always been those who are my innovators, my problem solvers, people who I know I don't have to hold their feet to a candle, you know, to when something comes up and it needs attention right away. I do better when I'm multitasking. My coworkers can tell you they don't understand when I sleep. I don't know how it all gets done, but the point is figuring out, do you do better under pressure, and learning about yourself, learning about when you work best, and not questioning it. Because there are times when I think, well, oh my gosh, am I doing, you know, is something, you know, am I not doing something right? And that's healthy, right? To wonder, to strive. But not, you know, if something works for you, then it works for you. As far as certifications, I am certified in anti-money laundering, which most people who work in financial crime compliance are certified in that. I know David also mentioned his CFA. That's also quite common in the financial space. And I would also say don't run out and get one of those certifications if you haven't landed in the industry, because they're very expensive out of pocket. And typically your employer, if they see all the things, or a prospective employer sees all the things that that are promising, they pay for you to take that. And that's you know, a really important distinction is balancing between your how much you expend on your education and how much you expend on these certifications, and what a prospective employer might pay, or even asking about what they do for continuing education, and what credits they give. I know to keep your certification for AML, you have to accrue a certain number of credits. For people who hold a JD or an LLM, they receive credits throughout the year to keep, you know, to keep that active as well. And so showing that. So some other things I would also mention is treating most people you run into as a prospective boss or interviewer. We've all seen those stories on the internet of someone who treated someone really nasty, and then all of a sudden that's the person who's interviewing them, or vice versa. And my bank is really great. They paid for a membership in what's called Elevate, ELLEVATE. And that's where I am networking with a lot of females, a lot of women in various levels. And someone from that program said, you know, when you cancel on someone, or just remember these are people you might need something from in the future. And I think the same goes for how you do your work in school. I mean, it starts with your BA. Do your professors, do you have name recognition on what you're doing? And I think when you have name recognition, when you've built a brand for yourself, even at that level, even at your BA level, that comes back in real ways that are meaningful. So one, that passion, right? And making sure that you do enough self reflection or examination or research on the field you're going into. Or maybe you're not quite ready to make that transition. Maybe you still need to stay in a certain position because it puts food on your table, and there's nothing wrong with that. But how are you identifying other opportunities to network with the right people and make that crossover? Certifications, to recap on that, definitely be talking to the right people and identifying those. Like I said, ACAMS is across the board one thing. There's a number of other certifications, but don't run right out and drain your bank account to do them. They're often very expensive. There's also a lot of courses that you can show and say, you know, maybe I didn't take this course in college, but Future Learn, or there's some other free courses out there to show those skills. Oh, you know, I've started the process already at no extra cost to me. That coding is really popular, like Maria mentioned. And so just, and then finally, you know, obviously knowing that everyone could be someone sitting across the table from you and asking you questions.
Thank you so much, Katie. Like we all learned, it's okay to be cheap. You don't need to necessarily spend your money on getting certifications. Always look for opportunities that pay for them. Like I mentioned before, it's always okay to ask questions. But there's this one question I think we're all curious about from all of you now. what is one thing you know now that you wish you knew as a student? One thing you know now, like one maybe information or knowledge you know now that you wish you knew as a student that would have definitely been a game changer. I'm gonna start with John since you're the first person on my screen.
That's a great question. But actually, before I don't want to take too much time, but before I jump into that, I was wondering, going back to what Katie just said about certification, and I'm wondering because the ICJ program expanded to the master's program. And I'm wondering, how hard would it be to get certified in one of these certificates in either the undergrad degree or the master's degree. So I think that could be a takeaway if maybe that's something that the school can actually offer to students as part of the curriculum. Because I think, like Katie said, don't go out there and get that certification unless you got that job. Because most oftentimes they will pay you, they will reimburse you to take that certification. But yeah, so that's one takeaway to Dr. Barberet. Maybe she can look into that later on. But as far as like what I that's a great question. To be honest with you, I think I really feel like maybe it's a very challenging question. To be honest with you, you always think about what you could have done better, like whether it was an exam or whether it was a class. I by no means was a straight A student. I did what I could when I could, and I think I did the best at the time. We always have time to reflect after the fact, right? 2020 is hindsight. So for me, I always struggle, whether it's John Jay College, whether it's my job, or whether when I was in the Army leading soldiers. Like there's always that question, like what I could have done better. And I think it comes down to, and maybe David knows this because we have this thing called AAR, After Action Report. So you always think about the things that you did well, the things that you did wrong, and then what are some things that you're gonna do in the future to kind of mitigate the stuff that went wrong. I mean, that's my general answer. So, but I take it, I pass it back to you, Palumi.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the insight. Definitely always take time to reflect on actions we take every time. The next person I would like to ask that same question is David. What is one thing you know now that you wish you knew as a student?
Yeah, it's I mean, it is a challenging question because it's hard to just, drill down into one thing. But, to be quite frank, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, for a lot of, and this was mentioned throughout everyone's story. We had no idea this world even existed. Maria, for example, I'm pointing out, she had no idea that she could apply herself in the way that she does now. So, if there's a big takeaway in that statement that I just made, I think it's, you really have to put yourself out there and yes, network, but just talk to people outside of your, the industry or the area that you're interested in as well, right? And so someone else mentioned this as well. Whoever you come across, treat them as your potential boss or someone who's going to interview. That is especially true because they can provide or shed light into something that you had never considered. And that happened so many times with me. And if it weren't for me, keeping an open mind and approaching it the way that I did, I don't think I would have gotten to where I am today. And also another thing that I didn't realize until later was, I mean, it's much harder now because, we're in this COVID environment, but you can actually ask people to shadow them in their jobs, right? And you'll be surprised to know that there are a lot of people who are willing to go out of their way to do that, right? I asked this of several people, but much later on, right? I wish I had done this much early on to know what I appreciate and to know what I don't appreciate, right? And so another takeaway for me is, hey, if there's something that you don't like or doesn't interest you, that's just as good as something that does interest you, right? Because now you're narrowing down what you really want to pursue. So I mean, I hope that answered your question. It's really not one thing, it's several things, but yeah, I'll just stop there.
David, if I could just jump in. I remember you in the classroom as a very good student, but a little bit shy. So how did you develop your extroverted personality?
Yeah, hey, you know, I am not extroverted to respond to that. And you just remind me about, someone mentioned about being an introvert and not doing so well with networking. That is true, and it depends on the context, right? You know, studies show, and I forget where the study is from, but it's a reputable source because it's from a professor, and I'm assuming from reputable source. And studies show that those who are more introverted are actually much more effective networkers, right? And the reason for that is, you know, you're not going out there being all gregarious and, you know, putting yourself in a group situation, introducing yourself. That's not how you operate, right? I think a lot of networking happens on a one-on-one basis, and introverts naturally do well in that context. And so, you know, just think about that for a second. Think about how you operate in your personal lives. Yeah, you're introverted. You don't do well in a public setting. You can build that up, sure, but I think you're more comfortable in a one-on-one setting. I bet that's the case for many people. And so I just want to, you know, leave that sort of thought of encouragement for you guys who are sort of fearful of networking and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, but that's an important part of just learning, just in your learning journey, because you're constantly learning. And so I hope that answers your question, Dr. B.
Thank you so much, David. Since that question seems like a very tough one, I'm just gonna come to a general consensus that networking is like the most important aspect of it all. I was gonna also not advertise, but like inform students that the ICJ Club, we're trying to do a good job on that. So guys, please always join the meetings. Always feel free to email me. I'll be happy to answer whatever questions. We also send out newsletters with great opportunities. So never discard any form of information, really. At this point, I would like to go back to Maria and also, I guess, definitely ask, what keeps you going in your current role? What's your motivation or inspiration? What keeps you going, basically?
Yep, thank you for the question. I generally am very passionate about investigating as a function. I like digging in for patterns, clues for abuse, and figuring out how did this occur and how do we make this not happen. And specifically in the type of space, which is the integrity space, I feel that closely relates to what I hold values to. Sort of, it's cheesy as it sounds, but doing the right thing or doing something for, let's just say, the greater good, quote unquote. But to me, that has a resonance because I feel like the work that I do has a positive impact, and I really find it interesting, and it like keeps you on your feet, so to say. But yeah, I think it is the ability to look at the big picture or look at a problem and figure out what is wrong. How did this happen? In the past roles, it was related to payments fraud. Like, how did this company lose this money? How did this business get impersonated and like all of their information get stolen? And you know, how did they bypass all these checks? And how do these actors who are let's just call it adversaries, how are they able to get by undetected? And what mechanisms we can put in place to detect them? I think it's like solving puzzles, so to say, and like this critical thinking that I find extremely interesting, and that I think it just gives constant feedback and keeps me kind of continuing to learn and continuing to like kind of go on, and every single day, so to say, is not the same as the previous.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you so much for that answer. Definitely, passion is a big thing in whatever role you find yourself. Otherwise, you're going to find what you're doing boring. I would like to go back to Amer and ask what his current likes are in his job. Like, what do you like the most about your job, and maybe one dislike, if you will, as well. Thank you, Amer.
What are the likes about my job? I think it's the constant learning. I am constantly doing different things every single day. Today, I could be investigating somebody in the real estate space. Tomorrow, I could be investigating a baseball player. Tomorrow, the day after, I could be doing somebody in Hollywood. I have no idea what these people do, but I have to learn what they do. And that just motivates me to keep going with my job. I'm the type of person that likes to be constantly learning. And for example, if I have to do an investigation in Argentina, I have to learn about the country itself and how the regulation works in Argentina, because it's not the same as in the US. And that just gives me motivation to do my work. Something that I don't like is that I work in the consultant space, and we don't have a steady workflow. One week I could be working 60 hours from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Then the next week, it could be a slow week where I'm done with work by noon. And that can get you a little disengaged when you have 2 to 3 weeks of not enough work. And then from one day to another, you have to work 12 to 13 hours a day. That's one thing that I don't like. Even if it balances out, you're in a constant flow. Like if I'm working a lot every day, the next day I'm expecting to work a lot. But if I'm not working enough, I get into, I would say, a laziness state where it will hit me to get back into the workflow.
Thank you so much, Amer. I would also like Relitza to also share what your current likes are about your job and your dislikes.
So I think my likes are very similar to what Amer just said. So my role, so we have a process that we do monthly, but I also have like a lot of new things that I'm doing every week. So we're constantly trying to figure out like new analysis, some ad hoc stuff that the senior management gives us. And right now it's a very interesting times because interest rates just like collapsed, and everyone is trying to figure out how to stop bleeding money. So currently it's very challenging. I feel that I'm learning way more right now than, let's say, in the last year, in the previous year. So what I don't like is that it's generally time, like everything is very time sensitive, and the amount of work has been just like increasing a lot. I mean, I've been doing like 70 hours in the last couple of weeks, and very often it's you don't really get much lead time. So for example, I got a bunch of stuff to do at 4:30 p.m. today, and I'll probably have to work on very late into the night. So it's kind of it's tough to like plan your life after work, and now it's fine because it's quarantine and you don't have much things to do. But sometimes they'll give, like sometimes we'll get work that has to be done pretty much for the next day, and if you have plans you have to cancel them, and it's been happening a lot. So I still really appreciate all the learning I'm doing, but usually it's like at the expense of like your personal time suffering. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Relitza. At this point, the Dean of Graduate Studies would make an announcement. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I have been enjoying so much this panel. I'm really proud of you guys with all the things that you have been doing. And I also very happy that our students are here. And thank you very much, our director, Professor Pretostian, his excellent work, and also Ms. Barnett or Dr. Barberet. Thank you very much for everything. I really enjoy. Pelumi, excellent job. I love it. I love it. You know, the important things that have been commenting here are three things. I took my notes, believe me, very quiet taking notes. Research, very important to learn to research. Global, being global is highly important. And I'm glad you are in, you know, in Manhattan, which we are global, but it's important also to communicate with people of other countries, language, and multicultural things, and networking. And this is very important, networking, networking, and networking. And then we were talking about introverts and extroverts. I have to tell you, I am introvert 100%, scared to death, immediately. But you know what? When you have to do what you have to do. You have to go to those meetings. You have to be here. You know, while you are here and putting these comments here, that's a way to network. You know, if you are interested in what David Wong is doing or Elmer, I hope you already going and tested. So you know what, I like it. Or what Maria is doing. You know, really is matter to communicate with the person that you would like to continue the conversation. Go to the LinkedIn profiles. Now I'll compromise all the panel now. Go to the LinkedIn profiles of the panels and say, hi, I was in the panel. I enjoy what Kathy was doing. And you say this and that. And take notes. You know, if I were you, I would say, you know, Wong, I read, you told me that introvert, you need to make that conversation go. You need to take these notes. I will go, Elmer, and say, Elmer, could you please tell me who's the next person you're talking about? You know, you really have to connect with your colleagues. And I really enjoy this. And I just want to, you know, also congratulate the 20-year anniversary of the International Criminal Justice. Is amazing. I'm here and I enjoy and thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you for being here. And anything that you need, we are here in the Graduate Studies always to serve you. And thank you for being so late here.
Thank you. Thank you for your announcements. And I think the MAICJ director wanted to make some announcements as well.
I think I managed to make most of my announcements in the chat about how wonderful our program is. If you haven't done the MA, please do it, because we are another reflection of the brilliant BA program that has gotten you and many of you so far. But I also wanted to let you all know that some of you may not be aware, the BA students, that last year we launched the BA MA program. And it's relatively new, so this will give you the opportunity to get both your BA and MA degree within 5 years. So this is something that you guys should consider. As always, I have been incredibly proud of the ICJ program. It's one of the greatest advantages of our programs, right, combined, is the multicultural and the global nature of the faculty and students. So we are what we teach, in a sense, right? So this also gives you kind of a more of a global networking opportunity that you should absolutely take advantage of. And if you guys ever have any questions, know that we're here to answer any questions you have, and hopefully welcome many of you into the MA program.
Thank you. Palumi, did you have more questions, or should we open to Q&A and draw them from the chat box? What do you think?
Oh, definitely. Let's open the floor for the other students. I think I spoke enough on the behalf.
Okay. I'm checking if we have any recent questions in the chat. I guess I'm sure people are curious about the fact that some of you have pursued MBAs. And the question is, I guess, what kinds of specific coursework that you could do during your BA? And we were talking about this before the webinar started, such as Excel skills or different kinds of accounting skills. Would you recommend for applying ICJ in the private sector? Whoever wants to take that one, and then I'll be quiet.
I can try to take this one. I think the technical skills are very important. But one thing I'm starting to notice as I'm starting to like advance at the job is that soft skills are actually getting more and more important the further up you go. So I would say anything with communications, presentation skills, that would be a good thing to kind of brush your skills up. Because I'm seeing how some very smart people with very deep technical skills sometimes struggle to actually convey what they came up with, to explain it to an audience. And on the other hand, people who are like really good at communicating and summarizing and just like talking really like being able to present an idea in a very succinct way, they sound really smart, and they are smart, but they just do a really good impression. And I just see these people kind of being able to move up in their jobs. But definitely, I think Excel skills would be, those are must-haves. Like those are kind of definitely must-haves in addition to the soft skills. I think I read a study that people with like liberal arts majors, because there was a long time the belief that they are just wasting their money, and you really have to have like a STEM degree to make it in today's world. But I read somewhere that like a combination of like a soft skill degree with a technical skill is actually much more preferred in the job sector, in different jobs right now.
I would just like to add, same thing to that you could probably get a minor in either forensic accounting or a minor in computer science. I personally stuck in the liberal arts field, where I got a minor in criminology, got a minor in sociology, got a BA in ICJ, and I wish that I had done less research and focused a little bit more on the technical side as well.
And I would just add, there's so many Excel courses that are free. And it's a lot of times you'll note people who almost are kind of don't really have profound Excel skills and don't really do anything about it. And it's typically a certain generation, but it's prohibitive to growth, certainly. And these people don't really do much about it, kind of laugh it off, as a, oh, well, you know me, we didn't have this, or, something like that. Excel can be so efficient for how we do our work. And I will also point out something like research methods, right? I have really made a lot of contributions in the sampling space based on research methods and statistics and those sorts of things that are valuable in this area. So there's things that mathematic principles that exist, and I believe, Dr. B, I know you taught or have taught research methods at least, like those are things that really can be translated quite well to doing testing and risk and controls and certain things.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. Would you recommend getting the ACAMS, is it, certification for a person with an MA in ICJ and no experience in AML?
I can take that. So I don't think it's really necessary. I think this goes back to what Katie said earlier in the evening, that it really isn't necessary unless you're already in the role. At that point, yes, it is a little challenging sometimes to get your foot in the door, but that's really what you should be focused on, is getting your foot in the door, in that financial firm, or if it's another type of industry that requires the ACAMS, but you don't really need it, right, to get in, to get your foot in the door. Once you're settled in the firm, it really depends on the teams, but like the firm will pay for it. You will get reimbursed. It just depends on certain things, but you don't, like Katie said, it is very expensive. Unless John Jay paid for it, or some other way he was going to get paid for it, then that's okay. But otherwise, you can just set it to the side and not worry about it.
John, another question for you here in the chat. What advice would you give to somebody that already works at JP Morgan and wanted to explore other options in AML KYC, but doesn't have work experience in that specific department?
So I think that you could do a couple of things. Obviously, this is where the networking comes into play. You really have to network. The fact that you're already in the firm, that helps a lot. And you can make certain connections. You can every organization, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this, will have their org hierarchy within their intranet, and you can look up who's on those teams, like who's in charge of, for us is Global Financial Crimes Compliance, GFCC, and I think that's pretty much the general term for other firms as well. But you try to find someone in that organization and try to strike a conversation and go that route. The other route is, the old way is just keep applying, find those open recs, and apply, and then go that way. I will tell you from my own personal experience, I didn't know what sanctions was. Even though when I first started at JP Morgan Chase, I started off as a anti-money laundering alert specialist, and that kind of opened the door as far as like AML alerts and things like that. But over time, I realized I found out about sanctions, even though it's something that we did talk about in at John Jay. It wasn't really like, it didn't really dawn on me like, oh my God, like the bank is really on sanctions. So it took me a few years to actually get to the team that I'm on now. But I saw the rec, and when I first applied to it, it was already full. So I had to wait 1.5 years, 2 years, and I saw the rec and I applied for it, and that's where I'm at now. So really, another thing, going back to Katie again, she said it, passion. If that's what your passion is right now, that's what you want to do, you're going to continue to strive to get that job. If if at first you don't succeed, then you just keep on trying. Try to make your connections, try to network on LinkedIn, try to find out who that person is that may be in charge of those teams in that org, and just try to do it that way. And I hope that answered the question.
Hey, if I may add, for you, SG, I mean, working at a big organization like JP Morgan, I think, affords you a lot of opportunities to many different people. And I'm sure there are a ton of affinity groups at JP Morgan, whether you're a veteran, whether you're Latino American or Asian, whatever it is, there's going to be an affinity group, right? Get yourself plugged in. And as basic as this sounds, that's how it all begins, right? So that's one way. And another way is, you have access to the org chart. Make use of that. You're going to pinpoint people, and it's going to seem like you're cold calling, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to see how many people are willing to help out. And if you just approach them in a way that, hey, I'd like to take you out for coffee, and I'd just like an informational, meaning I just like to learn about what you're doing, right? I'm genuinely interested in what you're doing, right? And so not only do you get to learn, you establish a relationship, and then you see how it goes from there. And that's how it all begins, right? And so, don't be gun shy with that, inviting people for coffee. I mean, sure treat. It's an extra $1 from the street carts, or Starbucks is $4. But, I think spending that kind of money on an established relationship goes a long way, and it's well worth your time, the money, and the effort.
And just wanted to add something quickly towards that. Another route that is not often spoken about is going through a recruiting agency. I personally before graduation, I got a contract with JP Morgan in the alert monitoring field space, where I worked at JP Morgan 2 months even before my graduation. And that's when like the contract was for 3 months. And then after the 3 months, it's like a trial period where they give you a contract through an agency, and then after the time is over, that's the chance that you have to network inside the company itself, and that's the chance that you have to prove yourself, that you're willing to learn, that you're willing to put 110% into whatever it is that you're doing. Just wanted to leave that out there, that's another route not often taken as your first job.
Okay, we have another question in the chat, and it's whether, and anybody can take this, I guess, whether the skills you're using now are skills you learned along the way, or are you still using your skills from your master's or undergrad programs?
I can just provide point from my experience. I definitely learned a lot along the way, especially as in this transition period. A lot of it came from taking some time during work that helped to I had a task that I had to do and I didn't know how to do it. And I was already in the job, I was in the role, and I don't know how to do it. So I sort of went out, did some searching, asked some colleagues for help, and sort of picked up along the way. And over time, it helped me, it sort of empowered me to be able to do more things and do my job better. I think I would really advertise SQL or SQL query language for tech. I think it's like an essential thing, and it really boosts having that technical skill in your resume in a lot of ways and in various places is being able to sort of ask the question and then answer the question yourself with the data that you need. And that really definitely empowers you, I think.
Anyone else in terms of the skills that you're using now? Did you learn them along the way, or are they still from your academic training?
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Katie.
Absolutely, still using the skills, but also getting comfortable with learning and being wrong, and also asking questions. I think when you start, or when you're maybe at the intern level, you worry about how you'll be perceived for asking too many questions or the caliber of the question. Make sure it's not something that you can easily answer yourself, right? Like if it's on, do a few things and then you go to someone and say, listen, I've checked X, Y, and Z. I've checked on the company intranet, INTRA, show that you've done the preliminary steps, but then, I'm stumped. And that saves so much time. It makes sure that you don't do something the wrong way. And then it's kind of, you feel bad, the other person, you're kind of thinking about, oh, well, am I on thin ice? You might really be sensitive to those shortcomings. But also when you do something wrong, how do you react to it? Or when you get feedback that is, developmental, how do you react to that? And how do you show the person how you've embraced it, even if it's maybe not done or presented in the most accessible way? And I think those, kind of also draw parallels to when a professor gives you feedback on an assignment, if they allow you to redo parts of an assignment, maybe to get it right, and taking up those opportunities, because it's an opportunity to make sure they're really trying to give you that learning opportunity. So it may feel kind of annoying, or if it's in a subject that's not interesting, but it's really something that is a skill that helps you later on and people notice.
Super. David, did you want to add to that?
I guess just real quickly is, in terms of much of what I do now, yeah, it was because of the collective sort of learning journey that ultimately got me to where I am today. But very specifically, what I do now, I would say 80 to 90% of it, I learned on the job, right? And I was trained up to do what I'm doing now. But as it, just to add to what Katie said, in terms of sort of applying yourself and presenting yourself in a way that's not only impressive, but also in a way that you can really apply yourself, is, yeah, you're going to have to be vulnerable. You're going to have to pay your dues. And I think we all have to sort of understand that, in the sense that, hey, you're going to have to do your due diligence, and everyone know these two words, right? You guys are all in the ICJ program, and many of you folks who do financial crimes and AML, you got to do your due diligence and do your research, understand the target, understand the objective, and do everything you can before you actually make an approach, and just be thoughtful and discerning about it. And before you speak, just pause for a second. Have I done everything I possibly can to better understand this? And so, yeah, a lot of it is common sense, but at the same time, you just pause for a second. And even in conversations, even in presentations, just taking a pause, it all really does make a difference. And so, yeah, I'll just stop there.
Thank you so much, David, for the answer. Is there any more questions or no?
I thought I saw one on salary negotiations there. I'm not sure.
Oh.
I don't know if you saw it. All right, so I'll just start off, and maybe someone will piggyback. But basically, with salary negotiations, do it. Even if you're just starting off entry level, there's a range. They're not going to tell you that when you talk to the recruiter or the hiring manager. The hiring manager is most likely not going to tell you that there's a range, but there is a range. I'm here to tell you there's a range. There's a low range, and then there's a high range. So what you have to do is like what David just said. Part of your due diligence is going to be the market salary, or the average salary on the market for that specific role that you're trying to go for. And it doesn't just stop at the entry level. You find yourself, as you go up in different ranks, I guess, you're always going to have to negotiate that. You always have to figure out what's the market value for the role that you're applying for, and you have to do it. Nobody's going to advocate on your behalf, because that's something that you have to do. But at the same time, you have to be flexible, and I think this goes. It should go without saying, but you really should be flexible and be ready to adapt. But that's my advice, is definitely negotiate no matter what role, whether it's entry level or whether you're going to be you're going for that CEO role at a different firm. Definitely negotiate.
Thank you so much, John. Everybody get that money, get that bag. Definitely.
I would also add, a lot of people are afraid to negotiate because they're worried all of a sudden they're going to take the job offer off the table, right? And they've already decided that they like you. Chances are they've already investigated you and invested money in doing the due diligence, the background check on you. So that's kind of, through a psychology standpoint, they've already stepped in these right directions towards you. The only thing they're going to do is say no, unless you're completely, a jerk or unprofessional in these discussions. Be also prepared to justify why you've asked for more. I had this happen recently. They put an offer on the table. I really wanted to get that position. I really wanted to, it was my ticket to another boss, right? And it was really important, but I knew to negotiate. I also had done my research and knew that I was being paid at the lower end of the salary range. and I knew my own worth, and I think some of this comes from self-development and finding that special balance, not between going in and thinking that you're hot stuff, but on the other end, and you see this a lot in women, we undersell ourselves. And so, reading the books, Nice Women Don't Get the Corner Office, things like that, and seeing, well, what fits with me, right? Because there's some things I just am not going to do, and they're not comfortable for me. But kind of, buying into your own brand and being prepared to say, well, here's these 3 reasons why, and here's how I've done my research. You don't just throw out a number. If you threw out something so astronomical, the answer would be flat out no, and then you wouldn't have any increase in that salary.
Just giving the story from the other end of the spectrum. I didn't negotiate. I had done my due diligence into seeing what was the range. And even before I had an offer, I already had a number on my mind as to what was the number that I was going to accept. And they offered me a number higher of what that I was going to accept. And I personally didn't think of any reason as to why should I ask for more money, because I knew that question was going to come back to me. And I thought to myself, let me not be greedy, which I could have probably asked for more and probably could have gotten it. But in my mind, I already was at a number above to what I was expecting.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one more thing to it, and I just want to make it clear, when you talk with the hiring manager, they already have a set number, right, in the range. So what's going to happen is they're always going to give you the lower number in the range, and if you don't say anything, that's what they're going to give you, even though there is some wiggle room to give you a higher salary, to start you off with a higher salary. So yes, always negotiate, and just be mindful that the first offer is not the final offer. And yeah, don't, like Katie said, don't be afraid to negotiate and really know what you're worth, how you value yourself in the whole market, and then go from there. Be fair and be flexible, and there'll be, from my experience and from what I've seen, they will return it back.
I also want to add, so when I was getting my first offer, I talked to my career advisor, and they suggested I ask point blank the HR person what the salary range is, and to my surprise, they did tell me what the salary range is for the position. And on the advice of my career advisor, you want to aim, obviously not at the top, but you want to aim kind of at the higher, a little bit higher than the middle, so that you can have room for growth into the salary range. But I think a lot of times they would actually tell you what the range is if you ask them. And I was able to negotiate a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Rolita. Don't be too scared to ask for more, guys. You're worth a lot more, I guess. I want to use this opportunity to thank all the panelists for coming and, endowing all of us with all the information. We'll definitely apply it in our various, endeavors. I hope everybody gets to apply it. And I think the panelists dropped their LinkedIn thing. You can connect with them on LinkedIn. David also dropped his email address if anybody has more questions. If you have questions about the club, I dropped my email address. You could also feel free to reach me. Or also, I know Roseanne is here. If you have questions regarding networking events, you could also email. The email just dropped. And I want to thank everybody for their time. And yeah, that's the end of everything. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned as much as I did. Have a very wonderful night. And we have a LinkedIn event October 29th. So please show up, and you're gonna learn how to brand yourself on LinkedIn. I don't know how to do that well. So yeah, show up October 29th, and you're gonna learn how to brand yourself better on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is getting more important. The panelists will tell you, but we don't have that much time anymore. So yeah, come and show out October 29th. We're going to send you the email. Yeah. All right. Good night, everybody. Wonderful dreams. And thank you, panelists. Bye.